inquiry that the phrase that was changed was so bad because it told you to worry and it didn't tell you what to do. He described it as the worst combination, and I would respectfully allow you to reflect upon that. If I can take you on to my final point, and it's in relation to a report, an expert report, which has been heard detail of in this inquiry by Professor Ailsa Henderson, and it's about confusing messages. Now, you have said in your evidence that messaging was incredibly important. Messaging in the end was the most important tool we had to deal with the virus. I don't think we should deprecate the importance of messaging. So at the heart of what you were doing, you thought messaging was a critical tool in relation to the pandemic. If we can have before us inquiry number 000269372, the report by Professor Ailsa Henderson, page 49, paragraphs 151 and 152. This is about advice given by the UK government over communications with the public. If about halfway down the paragraph, it starts an analysis of the text prepared speeches. An analysis of the text prepared speeches throughout 2020 shows that those speaking on behalf of the UK government did an incomplete job of outlining the territorial scope of their data, information or guidance. In the first months, there was almost no mention of devolved administrations or their first ministers. There was little attempt to outline what applied UK-wide and what applied only to England. The phrase "this country" was employed frequently to mean England or Great Britain or the United Kingdom. In general, spokespeople were slightly more likely to clarify if a UK-wide matter applied to the whole of the UK. And it goes on to give an instance. Given by your own admission the critical nature of the communications and the fact that messaging was the most important tool the UK had to deal with the virus, was sufficient consideration given by the UK government to ensuring that the geographical, jurisdictional of their data and information and guidance was made clear?
Well, I did my level best during the press conferences to try to make clear where the restrictions applied to. And I remember several times saying that they applied only in England and trying to restrict what we were saying. But I think
Mr. Johnson, I have one example.
You can't blame ministers for talking about this country when that's common parlance. And if I may say,
that ministers are talking on behalf of the UK government to all the people that they are getting it. So if they say this country, it has to be made clear which country it refers to. For example,
we're all one country.
For example, on the 23rd of June 2020, you clarified that measures applied to England only, and that's the one occasion it appears that's been highlighted, and then set out rules to follow for the British public. Is what was needed was clarity, and isn't it, in fact, that the problem was that the difficulty was created by the UK government? No. Later on in this report, it says that notwithstanding efforts throughout 2020, the UK COVID press briefings repeatedly failed to clarify rules governing school closures, rules for social gathering, funds for local authorities, funds for the coronavirus community support, the renewal task force, dedicated funding for mental health, bike voucher schemes, increased marshals on rail works, the reopening of car showrooms or other retails were all England specific. And they say this is, the report goes on to say this is particularly important as in some instances government spokespeople were calling for individuals to change their behaviour, and as such rules would not have applied throughout the UK. Indeed, it was advice about rules rather than data that suffered from a particular lack of clarity. So, given what is said in this report, Mr Johnston, did the UK government fail to properly implement the most important tool the UK government had to deal with the virus?
I think that if you look at the public understanding of what we were trying to say, it was remarkable how clearly people got the message, considering the extreme complexity of the rules and considering the fact that there was divergence,
Mr Johnson,
across the DAs.
Given the complexity,
I think what you've got here is in all this conversation, a perfect example of how different messaging can be confusing for ministers, for people across the whole of the UK. The virus thinks whatever the SNP may think, the virus thinks this is all one country.
I'm not asking.
That's the reality.
I'm not asking questions about the SNP. I'm asking questions about you and your ministers' messaging during the pandemic. You have said that what it was extremely complex issues, and there may be no doubt that was so. But wouldn't that be all the more reason that you made absolutely clear every time you stood up and spoke to the four nations, that you made it absolutely clear what the rules were for each nation in each country?
Well, I could have done that. I think that, and that might indeed be a way forward. I think it may be that you hit on a solution, which is that in future it should be entirely the job of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to announce the different rules that apply in different places across the UK, rather than having those messages blurred or anticipated. I happen to think that would still be immensely complicated, and people wouldn't understand quite why there were differences. All I'm saying is that I think there were legitimate democratic desire of the DAs to have their own approach to public health. I totally get that and I support that. But in the particular context of a brutal, pitiless pandemic, there had to be some way of helping the public with greater unity of messaging. That's all I'm saying.
And the best way to have such, the best way is not to look for unity, but to look for clarity. Would that be correct?
I think that clarity follows unity.
I think that we've gone far enough on that front.
obliged.
This is not going to become a seminar with respect. I shall return at 3:15.